Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. Continuing on with our race minigame series, when today going to be looking at adding the ability for the player to join the races. So we're going to set it up so you can either start the race normally, so just the NPC's race, or the player can join in. For the majority of people, the player racing in the game will be one of the key criteria. For, say, a medieval game or a game in passing, you might want to see just the NPCs racing. And you very well may want to put a gambling system in so you can bet on NPCs and stuff, a bit like horse races. You don't participate, you just watch, stuff like that. So in today's tutorial, we're going to massively modify our race controller so it fully supports the player joining in with the race whilst keeping the NPCs able to do it themselves. So let's get started. So we do have a bunch of changes to make, and we've got to kind of cleverly go around doing it. Now, I didn't do this at the start purely because the framework we've got does work very, very well. And if we had to add the player in at the same time as the NPCs, it could have got confusing. But a lot of the functions we can actually reuse. It's just the odd different ones we need to change. For example, the NPCs are told to follow the patrol points. The player doesn't need that. The NPCs, we track their destinations based on the spline points they hit when they change it. The player won't do that, will spawn triggers to the waypoints they need to get to. But then equally, things like we need to disable the player's input, whereas the NPCs, we just tell them to stop moving. And, a bunch of stuff like that, which is why it's a little bit different, but we can fit it in nicely. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to modify our race controller so we have two ways of starting it. Start race, which will just be with NPCs alone or no player, and then we'll have a start race with player. And that will basically almost create an objective for the player to say, you attend this race. So I'm going to come and open up our race controller, and where we've got our start race custom event, I'm just going to come up above and create another event called start race. And then I'm going to create one below it, another one, called Start Race No Player. Now, these you're not going to use in the game fully. You might do. These are more so we can dev them very easily. But then we will eventually get to the point where we'll add it into quests and objectives and stuff like that. And for both of these, just make sure you come and tick Calling Editor. And then on the Start Race, I'm actually going to come and untick Calling Editor. Then I'm going to modify the start race to have an input, player is racing. And then I'm going to call this start race from the two functions we've just created. So start race. Then for the with player, I will tick it. For the without player, I'm going to untick it. And that's basically how, using the race controller, you'll start and stop races eventually. So if you're gambling, you'll just call start race with player unticked. And start race ticked if you're doing a race or something. So, first thing I'm going to do is just make some more space, because when I tested this earlier, we used a lot of space, but we are going to clean the code up a lot. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually promote player is racing to a variable, and I'll just keep it called player is racing. And this is primarily just going to be used to tell if the player is racing later on in the different functions. I'll make it private by dragging it up because we don't need to witness it. So the first thing we're going to do is the racers array here we have specifies which racers are in the game. In this case, it's going to be two NPCs. They're the ones who are lined up for this race. What we're going to do is modify this to have a boolean to say if or not that is a player character. And then we're just going to dynamically add the player to it, because then everything flows really nicely. So I'm going to come back to our race controller, find the name of it, which is our S racer details. And I'm going to press Ctrl P to find it, and we'll search for S racer details. Inside here, I'll just add a variable saying is player, and I'll keep it as a boolean. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the point of this? Because if you've just got one player, surely there's another way. And whilst there is, whilst the option of my game being multiplayer isn't something I'm considering, it'd be nice if I consider it a little bit, because then if I ever do make the game multiplayer, it's got the option to work. Like, I'm not going into the whole server RTC clients, I'm not replicating the variables, but for a minigame, multiple players are considered it should be a lot less work to do later. So, for example, you could have a running race where all 4 racers are ticked as players. You'll need to do a little bit more work to replicate it and stuff, but the option is there. So that's why I've gone this route instead. So back on the race controller, the first thing we're going to do when is player racing, I'm going to add a branch. And if it's true, then I'm going to add the player to racers. So I'm just going to get racers and then I'll drag up backwards off the blue one and call make. And then for the character, I can just add in get player character. If you are doing multiplayer, you'll need to find another way to list the characters. For this one, it very well could be that as they go up and talk to the race scheduler, that guy, it adds them automatically that way. Just some way you need to add the player to it. For my one, I'm just adding them like that. So I'll wrap this in a comment, just so we remember what it does, and just say add player to racers. And then from that, I'm going to now connect it across to the normal functionality, which is all this stuff over here. But if it's also false because the player isn't racing, then I still want to do the same thing. So I'm just going to drag it down here and connect it back up over here like so. So if the player's racing, add them. If they're not, continue on anyway. Now we come inside here and we basically shuffle all of the racer starting locations, which are the 4 nodes here. And then we start looping over all the racers to assign them to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this completed down a bit more. That's for the for each loop there. And then I'm going to move all of this down quite a lot. I'm going to wrap this in a comment saying NPC race setup. And then for this break here, I'll move it up a little bit so we've got access to it. And I'm going to drop it down and we've got our is player node here. So I'm going to add a branch at the very top and connect the is player to it. I'll also make this smaller by clicking hide unconnected pins, which is very nice. And then if it's false, because it's not a player character, then we're going to carry on with setting the NPC up like normal. But if it is a player character, this is where we can start doing the player changes. So how do we start the game for the player to actually arrive at it? If you remember, this functionality here, the first thing it does is simply tell the player to go to the start point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something that's going to be infinitely useful across many, many games. And it's always one of them things that I think about and go, well, I really need this. And we're going to create a reusable trigger. And what this is for is if your player needs to go to a specific location, we could just use the vector. But if you move your map around, the vector breaks. We could also use a distance thing, but then you'd need a point of origin. Commonly, I did used to use target points, so you drag them in and that's your point. And that works, that's okay. But then you've got to have something ticking to get the distance to it. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a trigger box, which we've used many, many times, but I'm going to use it as a blueprint class alone. So I've come into my MISC blueprints folder, and I'm just going to create a new folder called triggers. And inside here, I'll create a new blueprint class, and I'm going to search for trigger. And you'll see you've got these trigger bases down here. I'm just going to pick a dead simple one. I'll just do and I'll click select. I'll call it trigger sphere underscore player arrival, and I'll open it up. So you see we've got a basic sphere here. I'll make it a little bit bigger, probably doubled it, and I'll hit compile and I'll just drag it out into world just to make sure it's a good size. Yeah, so that means that player's got to hit that sphere there. And then on here, I will come and override the on component begin overlap. I'll delete the demo functions that we don't need. And then I'll drag off of other actor. And I'll do equals, and I'll just double check this is the get player pawn. If you are running a multiplayer game, you're going to be far better setting up a custom collision profile, only checking for the types of players. Or you can check if the other actor's locally player controlled or something like that. I haven't got any custom collision settings up because at the moment I find it a real pain to set up every time. But once I do, I will put a tutorial out once I've got my head around it. It's just a lot cleaner of a way to do it. But this works super easily for now. And then all I'm going to do is create a new event dispatcher called onPlayerArrival. And I'll just drag it up and I'll call it directly after that. And that's all I'm going to do, nothing else. I'm not even going to destroy it because you may want the player to arrive at it multiple times. Say you've got the player must fetch some food and drag it to the drop-off point in 30 seconds. it's pointless destroying it, recreating it, destroying it, recreating it. You might as well just keep it there and track it. So it makes it really, really reusable. And now that we've got that, we can basically spawn this in at the correct point where the player's got to go to. Nobody else is going to trigger it except the player, which is going to work absolutely perfectly. So back on our race controller, true means the player is the current character. So what do we want to do? So we want to drag off and we want to do spawn actor from class. The class is going to be our new trigger sphere, player arrival. The transform, I will just split the struct like that and we'll deal with that in a moment. The collision handling, I'll set to always spawn because we don't care where it is. We're telling it specifically where we want to spawn based on these points here. So to get the point we're going to, we're going to reuse the same thing we do here. So I'll just copy that and paste it up here. And that's basically going through all of our starting locations, which we've shuffled at the beginning, and finding one. The key is we pass in the index to it, so we get the correct one. And then that'll give us our location. But in order to make it relative, just like we've done down here, we need to add it to the current location of the race controller. So what that means, if I just connect it to location, is on here, it's saying that this number 0 here, the location of it, of the spawn point, is minus 130. But we know it's not, because minus 130 is like all the way over here. This is where the center is. So what we do is we take the location of the race controller, which is 3000, we add on 130, and it will basically give us the world position of that specific node. It works every time. It sounds complex, but it's dead easy. So I'll drag this out, and I'll just wrap it in a comment called Spawn Players Trigger Sphere. And then after this, I'm going to drag off and do assign on, and you should be able to see our player arrival event dispatcher that we've just set up. And now we've got a way of detecting when this specific player hits this specific one. Before we carry on with this, one thing I think will be really nice is something I've got built into mine, which you may not have, but you could just use a billboard or something, is it'd be nice to show the player where they've got to go. Because if I drag this in and say the player's got to go, if I press G to simulate game mode, you can't see it at all. The player's not going to have any clue what they're doing. So I'm going to go back to the trigger sphere, and because I've got narrative navigator installed, I can add a navigation marker, and I can customize this as all the details I want. So I'll just call this, I can set an icon to whatever I want. So I've got some built-in icons. I'll do the exclamation mark, keep it as white, and then I'll also come down to add marker 2 and just set screen space so you can see it on the screen. And then back on our race controller, I'm going to drag off of this and I'm going to do get component by class. And the component we want is our navigation marker. And like I said, if you don't have the navigator or anything like that, just add a billboard and make it render in the game, or a plane or something like that. Something to just show the player where to go. And now that I've done that, I can drag off this and do get default marker settings. So I'll drag off the default marker settings and do set members. The members I want to set is the location name, and you can expose others if you want. But for me, I'm just going to call it race start. I'll connect it back up over here, and then I'll just make sure that I set the default marker settings like so. And then connect this finally back over to the event dispatcher, and I'll wrap this in a small comment saying customize marker settings, just to make it look a bit nicer. And we can move this across. So when the player arrives at the destination, before the race starts, what do we want to do? Well, we basically want to disable the player's input. So to disable the player's input, we do technically need this character here, but as you can see, this function's getting a bit big. So it's going to be nicer if we can clean it up a little. Now, unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to just highlight all of this and convert it to a function. Because we've got the several binds to it, it's actually going to freak out and block us. So we are actually going to have to do this a bit manually, but it'll be a lot nicer. So I'm going to actually create a new function called start race function. And I'll call it function just so we don't get errors with that one. I'm going to make sure it's got an input of is player racing. And then I'm going to come and copy every single bit here. And it will error, but that's okay. So we pasted it in. We'll move everything across. And we'll connect it to the start one here. And then we can go across and we'll just be able to see the odd bit of errors. So like the event dispatches disappeared on both of them, but that's okay. That's why we copied it, so we've got a backup of it. So what I'm going to do is drag this all the way across and just do bind on player arrival. And you'll notice we won't be able to do a sign with this one, but that's okay. And then I'll drag off and I'll create an event. And I'll just click add matching event here. I'll name this one player arrived starting area. And I'll make sure this event is on our actual event graph to stop any errors. Back on our start race function, make sure that it's selected it, which it hasn't, it's errored. So player arrived at starting area, that's good. The one down here is the NPC race setup. So we'll just jump back to our event graph, take a quick look. So it wants to bind event on go to location finished, that's okay. So we'll drag off of this and we'll do bind on location finished. And then just like we just did, we'll create an event. And then the one we'll select is the existing one on go to location finished event, which is the one here. So we'll just disconnect that one. And then I can move all of this just over here. You'll see the comment box messes up, but I'll just tell it to ignore all of that. There we go. So that's those two functions ready for it. And now we can successfully come and delete all of these bits here, like so. So as you can see, a lot neater. So these are erroring because we need to put the new function in. So we'll just add the new function, tick and connect. And we'll do the same with this one here. So everything compiles now. Back on our start race function, it now gives us the really nice ability to create local variables. So what I'm going to do is promote this array element to a local variable called current racer. And we can connect it up. And that means we don't need to drag those blue lines everywhere anymore. For the character down here, we can just get the current racer. We can break, and then we can get the character like that, just to make it a little bit neater. I'll also drag all of this back. I'll promote the index to a variable so we don't have to reuse that one as well. So local variable, current index. And I'll connect it up like so. Drag it across. I'll replace this blue line with the current racer, just because it looks neater. There we go. And then over here, I can drag the current index in. And I can do the same down here as well. So there you go. It's looking a lot neater already. Another thing I can do, if I drag that back, is actually promote this racer starting location and the mathematics of where we need to go. So I'm just going to cut that, move it up here and paste. Promote this to a local variable, starting point world location. I'm specifically calling it world location, so if another dev ever comes onto it, they're not going to sit wondering halfway through the function what that variable is, because it could be the local location, the relative location, but in this case we're specifically storing the world location, so it makes it a little bit more descriptive. And that means we don't have to do it here anymore, so we can just drag that in. And we also don't have to do it down here. So it's all looking a lot neater now. We could even go as far as to clean up these marker settings if we really wanted to, but I'm not going to because I don't think it's that bad. But I am going to come and promote this to a local variable called current trigger point. I'll connect it up, connect it over here, and then just over this one, I will drag in our current trigger point like so, just to make it a lot neater. And I'll also connect this one down here, just to really tidy up. That's all we were doing for that one. So now that we've done that, we can jump back now to actually disabling the player's input. And because this is all a lot neater, we don't have to worry too much about it. So how do we disable the player's input? Well, the first thing I want to do is just remodify this on player arrival, because I completely forgot to do it earlier. On the player arrival, I'm actually going to add an input of the character that's currently triggered it. So character, it'll be a type of character. And I'm just going to connect the other actor. And if we know it's a player at that point, I'm just going to cast this to a character, which is a base class already loaded anyway. So we're all good. And I'm just going to pass it in like that. And now we know specifically which player has hit it. Back on our race controller, this event will want to be updated. So if we just refresh it and refresh this one, you'll see this one here will need updating. So I'm just going to add an input of character. Otherwise, you'll get a signature error. And I'll call it the same thing using the same data type. I'll hit compile, no signature errors. But now we can drag off of this and we can do get controller. We can cast it to a normal player controller, just so we've got the actual player controller. And then we can drag off of this and do disable input. connect the player controller to both, but then what we can also do is drag the character down and connect that to the target as well. And this just basically means it'll disable any input you've got on your player controller, so things like your main menu, inventory, stuff like that, things you share across it, and then anything on your pawn which is specific to them. And back in our start race function, now that we've just sorted the player and we've sorted the NPC, we can go all the way to the end of the loop, so which is where we set the timeout to disqualify anybody who's late, and we do need to cater for the player in that one. So racer arrival timeout after 15 seconds, I'll open that up. And basically all this one does, if you don't remember, is it loops over all the racers who are ready. And then if they're not in the racers ready because they've not arrived, then it will time them out and disqualify them. So before we do modify this, let's make sure the player actually is added to it. So on event graph, when the player arrives and we've casted to them and disabled them, let's just add them to racers ready. So we'll drag off and do add. And you can see we can simply just grab the character and stick them in like that. Hit compile and save. Now the player won't be disqualified if they make it, which is all good. And then as we're timing them out here, we're finding them and removing them from active racers. So we don't actually want to do the stop active movement because the player won't need it. So I'm going to make a bit of space here. And from our racer detail, we can just drag off and do break. And we can get the is a player, so we can specifically say if this character is the player. If it's not, then we can just go to false, stop active movement. We'll make some space over here to print it out. If it's true, then this is where we need to actually disqualify the player from it, which in this case, we're not really going to do anything. We'll just connect it straight to the true like that for now. Eventually, you may want to put some flashy UI, but that's probably what this bit's going to be for anyway. So for now, we'll leave that as it is. And let's just give it a quick try and see where we are at the moment. So if I click play now, you'll see we start the game off. Let's climb over here so we can actually get a good run to it. If I find our race controller here, you'll see we've now got two buttons, with player and no player. So if we hit the with player, we should see the marker appear on the map. We should be able to run up to it and it should freeze the player. So let's try it. Play. Okay, so we've currently got nothing, which is a good sign. So let's go and have a look what we've missed to why it's not starting with the player. So we currently have a couple of errors, so that's probably why it's not working. So let's just click on one of the errors and just see where it takes us to. So the thing we've missed is right at the beginning when we're adding the player to the racers array, we can just drop it down and just make sure you actually tick it as a player. Otherwise, the game doesn't know you're a player and will try to treat you as an NPC, and that's why it glitched out. So if we try it this time, go to the race controller, click start race with player, you'll see we've got the marker. We can run up, we hit it, and the player has officially stopped. We can't do anything else. Now it's timing, and then that's it, we're ready to race. So what we need to do now is make sure we delete the marker, because we don't need that anymore. And then we can actually enable the player to start running around, and then we can start spawning the markers around. So let's disable the marker. So on our race controller, on our event here, which is when the player arrives at it, we need a way to figure out which trigger he arrived at to destroy it. So just like we did before, let's actually improve our trigger sphere. And on our event dispatcher, let's just add a trigger sphere to it. And then we'll set it to the same data type, trigger sphere player arrival. And we can just connect self to it. But what that now means is on our race controller, we can update this function to have another input of trigger sphere. And we can set the same data type to the player arrival. And we can just drag this down. And we can now call destroy. And that should delete the marker along with it. We'll just give that a quick test just to make sure that does. So start race with player. The player's now over here. We'll arrive at this location. It's destroyed. We can't move. We can't do anything. Good. The race counts down because everybody's arrived and we're good to go. So back on our race controller, let's now enable the player's input. So on racer countdown, which is our function that counts the 3, 2, 1, go. At the moment, we do all the counting and we come to racer start running. So let's open this. Then we say go, go, go. We loop over each racer and we set their movement speed their actor to follow and their AI logic, well, we don't actually need to do any of that for the player. So what I'm going to do is drag all of this across and wrap it in a comment, NPC running enabled, and I'll move it down. I'll promote the array element to a local branch called current racer spec because we've already got current racer there. So on here, we can now break on this and we can get the is player just like we did, branch, connect it all up like so, hide the pins we don't need, and now we've got a difference between the NPC and the player, which is good. So what is the main difference? So the player is going to need his input re-enabled again, which is basically doing the opposite of what we've done, and then eventually we'll be spawning the UI to say go, 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 stuff like that. So I will grab the current racer spec, I will break on this to get the character, and then I'm going to basically come back to the event graph. I'm going to copy these first 3 nodes here. Come back to racer start running, paste it afterwards, and everywhere it needs a target, we can connect the character in like so. Just make sure to also connect the character across to the disable input. But instead of disable, we're actually just going to go enable input. And we'll move all of the points across like so, holding control and dragging to move the entire node. And then we can just quickly swap it out like so. For this, we'll add a comment, enable player input. So the next thing we need to do after this is actually start spawning the markers to tell the player, go here, go here, go here. And now we have to really think on how we want to do this because it's entirely going to depend on your game and what you want. So games like Midnight Club and, racing games, they typically have these either plumes of smoke with arrows in or something like that, and that shows where you need to go to. Other games like San Andreas have these big red beams of light with an arrow in. And then games like The Witcher don't seem to have anything at all because I think they're invisible. Because you can see on the minimap at the top, they have to follow the green line, and the minimap is showing each of these beacon things as it. So they've got a physical 3D mesh that makes it seem like it's in the world, but it's not, completely abstract. It's not a beam of light in a somewhat realistic game. And so many games do it in different ways. So it really does come down to your art style and what you want. Seeing as I'm not the greatest artist in the world, what I'm going to do is do what I do best and, borrow it from an asset pack I own. So in my Ancient Egypt asset pack, which is a Sinti one, I've got something called a God Ray. And if I drag it in, you can see it's basically just this shining light thing here. It works. I think that's exactly what I want. I'm going to, of course, make it a bit thicker and a bit bigger. We'll modify it a tiny bit. You can also make it taller if you want, just by moving it up. But for me, that's pretty decent. You could do, like I say, you could just move it up higher like that. But we're going to modify it to change colours and stuff as well. So another thing I was thinking is I couldn't find a screenshot of it, but I'm like 99% sure I see it all the time. And that's, I want to show the current waypoint. So if we're starting here, this one will glow, say, red or green to say go here. But then your next one will be available, but it'll be a different colour to say, this is where you're going to go. So, for example, if I run down here and I stop here, which way do I need to go? If the road's not blocked off, it could say go both ways. For us, we know it goes to the same way. That's fine. But what we could do is have it here. When we're here, have that one be green. And as we look around, we can see that one be grey or red or something to say, this is your next objective. So as I'm running down here, we can go, hold on, this seems shorter in the adrenaline of the moment. Let's run down here. And we'll arrive at it and we'll make it. So that's what the plan is. That we will eventually reuse, change its colour and do what we need. So what I'm going to do is come and find this God Ray. And then I'm actually just going to make a copy of it in my asset packs folder. I'll move it into the custom folder. And I'll just make a new folder in here called FX. And I'll make sure the God Rays is a part of that. So I'll name this one NS God Ray _ current destination. Or main, you could use it for objectives. So I'll open it up. And I will be honest, I'm not a big Niagara user. I can change very basic stuff. It's one of them things I want to do a tutorial on, which is why I'm not going to get into this a lot. But all I know what I want to do is I want to change the spawn rate to something like 10, because then it makes it spawn more intense, which looks nice. and then I want to change the colour here. So I don't want it to be white to say this is where you need to go. So maybe red, which is a common one, but I'm thinking also maybe green for, you know, go. But we'll go red because that seems tried and tested for a lot of things. And I'll hit compile and save. And now if I drag it in, we've got our red ones, look. Like so. Oh, reddy orange, yeah. So now that I've got the current destination, I'm just going to duplicate it with Control or Command D, and I'll just call it next destination. And this one, I'll change the colour of it. You could probably do something where you change the colour directly, but like I say, I'm not a big Niagara user. And I'll just set this just probably to a dark grey. So when you can see it, not a black, but a good grey, just so you can see it. And then like I say, this one will be the current destination, and it'll zoom up. This one will be the next destination. So as you're walking or driving around, you will indeed see what you need like so. So you come down, beep. That one will now turn to red, and the grey one will go down there. Grey is not fantastic. It's a bit hidden. But once you've got all your landscapes on and stuff, it should probably look better. Yeah, I made it more white. It looks better now. So as you come down, you'll see that one, beep, and you'll see that one. Now, I'm not 100% sure if the duration of them, the speed, is going to work for us. But when your map's bigger, it will work. But we will see. So what I'm going to do is come and create a custom blueprint inside my content blueprints folder. I'll go into MISC, and I'll create a new folder called World Markers. And inside here, I'll create a new blueprint, actor, BP world marker. And then I can come and add the corresponding one we need in here. So I'll come and add the new Niagara particle system component. I'll search for our custom God ray, current destination, like so. We can even move it up, like I say, if you wanted it taller. Then on the event graph, I'll add a custom event called set current destination. And then all I'm going to do is grab the Niagara particle, and I'm going to do set Niagara system asset. And the asset we want for this one, at least, is the current destination. And then we do want to reset the existing override parameters. And then I'm going to duplicate all of this just below itself and call this one set next destination. And we'll set this one to the God ray, which is next destination. So now we've got a nice easy way to flick between them both. So back on our race controller, let's actually start spawning these markers in. So I'm going to add a new function, SpawnPlayerMarkers. And I know we've talked about multiplayer a little bit on this one. In my head, this SpawnPlayerMarkers will be running on the server, and you'll have to find a way to pass it to each individual client to show their specific markers. Because otherwise, you're going to run into an issue where each player is seeing every other person's markers, and you don't want that. So in order to get this to work, we're going to need to store the player's current patrol point. So as they're walking around, these are the patrol points where we're going to be spawning the markers. So just like the NPCs, we need to store the current one. We then need a variable to store the current destination marker and then the next destination marker, because we're going to be having them on screen, and we need to store the specific ones for each character. So on the racers array, on the race controller, we do actually have a couple of temporary variables built into it, such as the current lap and position and finished. This is going to be a great place for us to add our player-specific ones, such as current patrol point, which we could easily bring in the NPCs if we need to, but I don't think we need to, and the two destinations. So I'm going to come and modify this S-Racer details again, and I'll add a variable, player current patrol point, and I'll set this to a BP patrol point. I'll add our player next destination, and we'll set this to our BP world marker. And then we'll do the same thing, but for the player current destination. And this way, if you do have multiple players, they're all stored independently so they can have their own specific markers, and then it'll just be up to you to make it only visible to that player. So now we can start using these variables. So back in our race controller, on SpawnPlayerMarkers, so we're going to pass in the current racer detail, because back where we're running this on racer start running, we do have the current racer spec already. So I'll pass in the racer detail struct, like so, and then we can break off of this. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the player next destination, so the next one, and we're going to say, is it valid? Does it exist already? And this is basically going to be, if it doesn't exist, this is the first time we're running this, aka the mission has just started, the race. So that's where we can go on and spawn things as we need to. But if it does exist, then it means we need to flip it around. So we need to get the next one and we need to place it into the current one, and then we need to spawn a new next one. So let's start with it's the first of the race. So it's not valid. It means we've not spawned any markers. And the reason we're using the next one instead of the current is because when you get to the final lap, we'll want a different marker. Make sure we know that they've finished it and we don't want to tell them to go around again. So that's why we're checking next. Is not valid. We're going to drag down and do spawn actor from class. We'll spawn our world marker in place. And because we know it's the start of the game, we can drag in the starting patrol point. We'll split the struct like so, and we'll just get the actor location and plug it into there because we know it's the first one. Collision handling, we'll just say always spawn. There's no collisions, we don't need to worry about it. And then we're going to set this to the current one. So I'm going to drag in the races array. So we'll do find. The find we want to find is the race detail like so. So the struct we've got there, find it in the list of all our races. Once we've got it, that'll give us the index of it. So we can now drag off of this and do set array element, connect the find to it, and then the item is now our custom one. We'll drag off the racer detail and do set members, connect the struct up to that one like so. We need to reorder this a bit like so. The members that we want to set, we already know is going to be our current destination, and we can just connect this to there like so. So that's how we spawn the current one, which is going to be the first one we need to go to. In this case, will be that one there. So we've got this warning that it's a read-only property, super easy to fix. We'll just promote this to a local variable called current racer detail. Connect it all up like so. And then instead of using this one, we'll use the current racer detail. And it'll allow us to modify it. And that'll reset it. We'll size it to fit so it doesn't error. And we'll select all of this and do set current waypoint. Now there is one minor thing that I have just discovered. The starting patrol point is actually the starting one here, which for the player, we don't want that. We want it to be that one first because you're already here. So all I'm going to do is go back to our starting patrol point and just do get next patrol point like so. We can connect it up like so, plug the target in, and then we've pretty much done the same thing. But we know it's forwards as well. There we go. So now that, when we run it, should spawn the current one on that one right there. So now we've got some other properties we can set. So we'll come and tick the two variables because we may as well set it all in one go. So we'll drag this across. We'll promote the next patrol point to a local variable called new current patrol point and connect it up like so. And then this just means at the very end, when we are setting the variables, we can just set the new current patrol point like so. And as you can see, we've got one missing, which is our next one. So how do we do that? Well, it is kind of the exact same way. I'll first make this a variable called current world marker. And we'll connect this over here as well, so just to clean it up a little bit. And then we're basically going to do the exact same thing we've done here, where we copy and paste all this over here to be the next one. But the differences are, instead of current world marker, it will be the next world marker. We can connect the next world marker into the set here, like so. And then we'll make some more space. We'll drag off this next world marker, and this is where we call our custom ones, because by default it's already set to it. We'll set it to the set next destination to change its marker and everything. And we can connect that over to there. But the key thing is, to get the location, all we're going to do is drag off our new current patrol point, which is that one over there. And we're going to do next patrol point, and that's going to randomly pick another one in front of us. And we can connect that one into it and get the location of that one. So we'll drag off of this and do get actor location, and we can plug it in like this. So I know that seems a little bit complex just for the starting one, but it's really, really simple. All we do is get the starting patrol point, which is this one here. But I may actually experiment with moving it to the next one. It might make it better, but we'll see. And then in our case, we get the first one that we need to run to, which is that one. We spawn a world marker. and that's this bit here. We get the patrol point, we spawn a world marker. Then we get the next one, which is that one, and we spawn another world marker, but we make it the next one. And that's this bit here, and then we update the array to tell it it's actually done it. So let's actually give this a try, and I know we've not built anything next onto it yet, but it'll at least tell us if we're on the right track. So back on race to start running, for this player, we will just drag in SpawnPlayerMarkers to kickstart it. It'll ask for the racer detail, which we already have the racer spec for, and we can plug it in like so. So at the moment, we're only spawning markers. We are going to have to spawn our triggers as well, but for now, let's see how we're looking. So we'll come down here. We'll go to our race controller, and we will click Start Race with Player. You can see the player is there. Let's move up to it. We can't move, which is good. He will start counting down at the top corner. 3, 2, 1, go, go, go. And we've got the controls back and we can run. The marker has appeared and the secondary marker is there. Ladies and gentlemen, how cool does that look? That is looking very nice. So next what we need to do is actually spawn the triggers into it. So we actually put the trigger there, and as we run into it, oh, we've already lost the race. We'll make it quite big, but when we run into it, it continues the trend. So this one will make it hide, and it'll trigger that one to be the next one, and we'll run down and trigger this one as well. So now let's move on to spawning the actual triggers in place so we know when the race is progressing. So where we spawn the markers on SpawnPlayerMarkers, it's an ideal place to spawn the triggers as well. So I am going to come to my MISC triggers folder that we had earlier, and I am actually going to make a child blueprint of this one. I'll call it TSPA for Trigger Sphere Player Arrival, so you know it relates to it. But I'm going to call this one Racing Minigame. And the reason I'm doing this is we want the racing one to be bigger by default. It's going to be a bit of a pain to resize this in the code each time we want it, instead of just having a child that we can consistently change. So I'm going to drag this TSA Racing Minigame into here. So we know it's about that big, but I want it to be bigger than that. So I'm just going to keep increasing the size till it's a decent size, like that, look. So you come near it, we're definitely going to hit this to come around the corner, and like in most areas, we're always going to hit the same one, at least in mine. So I know I need to set the basic size, we'll do 450 or 500, something like that. So I can come in here, I can set the basic size to like 500, compile and save, and now we can just spawn that one in, and each time we spawn it, we don't have to worry about the scaling, it's just the right size. It's the benefit of little child blueprints like that. So back on the race controller, where we set the current waypoint and we reset everything up like that, what I'm going to do is right at the end, because we don't need to store it, I'm going to drag off and do Spawn Actor. The class is going to be our TSPA, Racing Minigame. The Spawn Transform, we can actually just use our current world marker and just get the location of it, because we already know it's in the right place. We don't need to worry about the rotations or anything, but we will say it will always spawn. And after this, we'll bind on player arrival, just like we did earlier. And we'll create a new event on this. And we'll create a new event called Player Arrived Patrol Point. And we can move this to our event graph just so it's in line with everything else. And now we've got a definite way of saying which player arrived at which trigger sphere. So we'll wrap this in a comment, spawn trigger, and we'll hit compile and save. And when we hit that event here, what do we want to do? Well, we really want to do the exact same thing as what the NPCs do. So the NPCs use the function BP Race Controller Autogen, which is a funky name that we are going to rename, but it's basically from this event here. So from race to start running, when we did all the player stuff and we spawned the markers, the NPCs come down here, they start all the AI, they set the patrol point, and then we've got this event on here. So let's just rename this to something easier. NPC new patrol point. There we go. So that's a lot easier. But the function basically is going to be the same. So we pass in the patrol point that they've just arrived to, and it checks if they've finished a lap. If they have, it increases their lap count and repopulates the array. And then it checks if they themselves have finished the race, and then goes to race finish. Whilst we will be coming back to this later to improve this, this actually does everything we need. So I am going to rename it from new from NPC new patrol point to racer new patrol point. And then I'll click on it, and you'll also notice it's called NPC. I'll call this character, and I'll make sure the data type is also character, like so. And I'll hit compile and save. You will see we'll have an error because the signatures aren't the same. All a signature is basically an event's name and the inputs and outputs. That's it. That's all the signature is. But you'll notice this one isn't going to work anymore. But what I am going to do is just the same as we did with the player. I'll create a new event called NPC arrived at patrol point. And I'll cut this and paste it just the same as where we did the players one here. I'll make sure back on the racer start racing, it's using the correct one now. So NPC arrived at patrol point. But then now what we can do is we can connect these up to the same function. So racer new patrol point, we'll put the player in, will be the character like so. We need to get the player's old patrol point, which in our case, we can drag off and do find racer by character. And then we've got the detail which we can break on, and we can connect the current patrol point to the old patrol point because we don't need to worry about the next one. We can do the exact same thing for the NPCs, but we can just connect it directly to it, like so. And the character you'll see will allow us to transform it because NPC is basically a character. It's got a parent class of it. So now, when that calls racer new patrol point for the player, it will check if they finished a lap, it will update the lap if they have, and then it will continue on. However, one of the next things we've got to do is, unlike the NPCs, where their patrol point is handled by their state tree, the player doesn't have a state tree. So what we need to do is, instead of just calling racer new patrol point for the player, with the NPC that's okay, with the player, we've got to tell it to go to the next one. So thankfully, with the way we've set it up, this is as simple as calling SpawnPlayerMarkers. And we're passing the racer detail, which we've got here, like so. And then in here, it will come back to it, right at the top, it will come in, cache it, get the next destination, which we now know exists because we've done this on the first one. So now we can come in, we can clear up and go to the next ones and repeat it. So it is going to be a little bit different. It's not 100% identical. So the first thing we need to do when we come to is valid, because we know the next destination is available, we will get the current racer detail, we'll break on it, and we'll get the next destination. We're going to set it to the current destination, so it changes from grey or white to red. So we're going to come and grab this setting code here, which basically updates the array. And we do want to use this, but we're going to set it with different things up here. So we're going to come and set current world marker back to the next world marker, because we know that one already exists. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, I've just found a massive optimization in the middle of this. So instead of actually setting the current destination, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to get the next destination, and we're going to get the actor location. Then we're going to get the current destination, and we're going to set actor location. So we're basically moving the red one to the white one. So they're now in the same position. And then we're going to get the current patrol point, and we're going to get the next one, just like we did below. And that'll give us the next patrol point we need to go to. We're going to populate new current patrol point with the patrol point that we've got. And we'll make some space over here like so, because this makes sense for it to be here. There's less lines. And now that we've moved the current one to the next one, we can now move the next one, so set actor location, to the next waypoint. So we'll get the new current waypoint. Then just like we did down here, where we got the next one, we're going to do it again. So we'll get next to get the one after it. And we'll use this one to populate the future one, the secondary one, actor location. And we'll plug it in there like so, and we'll connect it up. So we will go over this in a moment, because I'm aware it's a little bit confusing. All of these can now technically stay the same. So what I'm actually going to do is delete that, and I'm going to move all of this here outside of this comment box, and I'm going to move it up. Same with the spawn trigger. And we can just connect this one to the same bit of code to just follow the ending on. So let's go over this again, because I know it's a little bit confusing, but it's really easy when you get your head around it. So we first come in at the beginning of the race, and all we're doing is caching the player's racer detail for use later. We're checking if they've got a next destination, meaning we've already run the process once. If they haven't, we'll come down here and we'll get the next patrol point, which for us, the starting one is this one, so the next one will be that one. And then we're going to spawn one of our red markers there. And then we're going to get the waypoint after this one, which will be that one. And we're going to spawn another marker there to say this is where you're going next. And then we're updating the racer details, so we've got it cached. And then we're spawning the trigger at that place so the player can hit it. Then once the player hits this trigger, it recalls this same function to come in after it's checked the laps. And it will say, have you got a next destination? Which we do now because we've just added it. Then it will come in here and it will get the next patrol point after the one we're on. So in this case, we've hit this one for the first time. It will now get us this one. It's going to move the red marker to say go here to this point, which will be our next one previously. It'll move the white one to the next patrol point, which will be one of these two. Now it is going to randomly pick one. And in the next episode, we will look at improving this a little because we don't want it to say you have to go here when this shortcut's perfectly available. So what we're actually going to make it do is forward think. And we're going to say, is this patrol point available of a marker? No. Try this one. Is this one available of a marker? No. Is this one? Yes. Because it's a race, you go in a loop, essentially. And it doesn't matter if it goes that way or that way, because if it comes this way, is this available for a marker? We'll set it to no, and we'll make it come here. But we'll do that in the next video, because I'm aware this one's over an hour long now. But that's all the race controller is doing now. And then down here, it just reuses the same set logic that we've used before. And then with a bit of tidy up, we can hopefully remove some of these lines. So we'll just comment this, update racers array, and then we just spawn the trigger like normal. I'm thinking this spawn trigger is good, but we can do the same optimization we did here. I don't know if any of you watched my NPCs tutorial about pooling, but object pooling is where we save resources by reusing what we've already got. So here, we're reusing what we've already spawned down here, which is good. Here, the trigger, we can absolutely reuse this each time. We just need to move it into the right place. So what I am actually going to do is disconnect the trigger from that one and move it down here. And then we'll move the racers array over to the other side and put this at the bottom one here. So the first thing this does is actually come in and spawn the trigger for us, what the player needs to run into. And then all we need to do is cache this and move it into the right place afterwards. So I'm going to make a bit of space over here, and I'll promote this to a local variable called current racing arrival, and we'll connect all this up. And then we need to cache this somewhere so we can actually remember, so we can actually get it for each player when they restart the race. So we're going to update our S details again, just for the player. So we'll come in and add our player current arrival trigger. This will be our TSPA racing minigame. Save it, jump back into our race controller, and you can see we now can set the current arrival trigger, which will be our new variable here. And then because we've set it, we can now get it again from over here. So I'll just copy this, bring it down here because there's no point in stretching it all the way down there. Current arrival trigger, set actor location. The place we want to set it to will be our player current destination. So we can just come in and get our current destination, get actor location, and we can plug it into the location like this. So that's a very nice optimization I did not discover in the previous attempt, so that's quite good. And we will say set new trigger location, and we'll hit compile and save. So I did just actively run this, and it basically almost chomped through my computer for some reason. Basically, as we were in this here, it was rerunning the code to spawn the markers at the start over and over and over and over and over again, almost like it wasn't saving it. So I debugged it and went through it, and I got all the way down to here. It's not finding the racer by the detail here, which kind of sucks because that's a nice clean way of doing it. But it's super easy to fix because all we need to do is get the current racer detail and break on it. Then we do find character, racer by character, and then we've got the racer detail, which we can plug the index into here, which is exactly why we built it in the first place. Then another bug is we've not actually repopulated these local variables. So across here, when we spawn the next world marker, we reuse it here. So what I'm going to do is actually move this down a bit, and then I'm going to copy it all and paste it above, but we're going to massively change it for the update. So on the insert, we set all the initial variables, we do all the variable swapping, everything we need to do. But on the one above, we're not going to do that anymore. Instead, we're only basically going to set the current patrol point, because everything else is already taken care of. And we can drag this all the way over here and just connect it straight up like so. So everything else is taken care of there, but the only thing that's actively changing that we need to save is the next patrol point. That way, we're not clearing the variables out after we've used it. So if we try it this time, and we'll start the race from going, so start race with player. So everyone start to move into the right place, we'll move in. It'll say 3, 2, 1, go, and we'll see our destination. Let's go and hit it, and you'll see it will move over to the next one. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hit this one. And as I said, we will work on the shortcuts eventually. And then there we go to the next lap. Oh, and that one's already won, because we've not finished detecting the finish line yet. So we've still got some stuff to do, but I think for now, because this tutorial is getting really, really long, I am going to leave it here. So the bits what we need to improve or work on next time, because the player can participate now, is currently, if you hit this backwards, the player just stays standing forwards and you can't do anything about it. Him automatically turning around to the correct position will be good. Next, I want to make these fade in quicker because we can't really see it. And we need to work on the tagging system so it takes into account shortcuts. And then finally, we just need to fix the bug with the destination so it doesn't show the next one because we've already done. We can put a fancy one there if we want to, or just leave it as such. And then when we hit it, it needs to end the race because currently it's carrying on. But there's a few glitches where it goes to this one, and this one, and that one, which is, you know, there's little bits like that we need to solve. So I don't like leaving tutorials half done, which I do apologise for, but it's an hour and a half long, so at time of recording. So thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We're almost there with adding our player into the racing minigame, which is going to be so cool when it's done. In the future tutorials, after we've fully integrated the player, we're going to add things like new UI, so it shows on the screen, sounds, and then we'll look at ways of starting the racing minigame. So maybe this doesn't exist until you, I can't remember what you do on San Andreas, you know, you go and see your sister's boyfriend and he offers you street racing if you need extra cash. Whatever, you know, something like that. And you get to it, and then we can start the races, and we can start even looking at rewards. So when you win first place or something, you can take that. If enough of you ask for it, we can also add the gambling system in. Like I say, you can wager on a specific NPC to win. So thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a long one, but it was absolutely worth it to add the player into it. Thanks for watching. My name's Decryption, and I will see you next time.